This week I've been working on, and I was up till 3:30 or so AM completing an article that I entitled "The Illusion of Knowledge is Up So Late" because since I'm traveling this week, I'm in a time crunch. But I thought it's really important because the fact that there's been this transition taking place where we're shifting over more and more people is that they're relying more and more on short form content, whether it's YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and TikToks. It's changing the way we consume information. And there are very significant implications as far as our ability to deeply understand complex issues. And one of the most concerning aspects of that is it creates this illusion of knowledge. We think we understand what's going on or understand a lot more than we actually do. I will be referring to my notes in this chapter or this article I'm completing because it is so in depth that I want to make sure I say everything I need to include here. I'm Ben Ufana. So, what's happening as we're ingesting more and more of this short form content, which consists of these quick bursts of content, often limited to a minute or less. And it encourages us to believe that we have a meaningful understanding of issues, whether it's politics, medicine, or science, or parenting, relationships, getting over a breakup or a divorce, narcissistic abuse, or whatever realities we're facing in our lives. We think we know what's going on. Again, we're consuming all this information in short, rapid fire formats. We feel like we're learning something, and the algorithms on these platforms, they're designed to keep feeding us similar content to what we've already watched, creating a feedback loop that reinforces a false sense of understanding. In reality, the information provided in these formats is often highly superficial. It lacks nuance, context, and the depth needed to truly grasp the complexity of the issues at hand. For example, a 60 or 30-second video on climate change can leave us with the impression that we've gained enough understanding to actually know what's going on. However, these snippets cannot cover the breadth of research or debate or the detailed information required to fully comprehend these complex issues. As a result, we often overestimate how much we know based on these brief encounters with content. This is especially troubling because it contributes to a shallow understanding of the world and it reduces our capacity to engage in meaningful discourse. As I was saying, short form content often lacks depth and context. And it's not just a limitation of the format, it's also because of the way these platforms are designed. The primary goal is to keep us engaged, which often means a prioritizing of sensationalism over thoughtful and well researched information. As a result, we're frequently exposed to content stripped of its broader context, reducing complex issues into overly simplistic narratives that can be quickly digested. The lack of depth means that we're not encouraged to think critically or to explore a subject in detail. And without the necessary context, we're unable to grasp the interconnectedness of various issues or appreciate the underlying factors that contribute to them. For example, a short video featuring the highly charged and often misleading rhetoric spewed by a lot of political figures lacks the context of policy debate. It often fails to provide accurate information about the issues and often leads us to form opinions based on incomplete information or even worse, outright lies. There's a pervasive dysfunction to the ecosystem of these platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Content creators are finding themselves caught in this absolutely insane competition driven by algorithms that prioritize eye-catching content designed to capture and hold your attention. To do this, creators often rely on fast-moving images and rapid pacing, which engages your reactive mind rather than encouraging rational or reflective thought. And this constant barrage of visually stimulating content keeps you hooked into a cycle of reactivity, making it harder for you to think critically or to engage with ideas on a deeper level. Another significant issue here is the impact of short form content on our attention spans and patience. As we become more accustomed to consuming information in quick, bite sized formats, our ability to engage in longer form content diminishes. And this trend is evident in the erosion of our attention spans as we increasingly lack the capacity to maintain the focus necessary for longer videos and articles. And many of us dropping off after a few minutes. We no longer have the patience to sit through extended discussions or presentations, which means we miss out on the opportunity to develop a deeper understanding of the subject matter. And because of this skimming approach, we're developing a fragmented understanding of various issues that concern us, possessing only a surface level knowledge, lacking the ability to connect different pieces of information coherently. The cumulative effect of these changes is resulting in a dumbing down of society because when we're primarily consuming all this fragmented, oversimplified content, we're not developing the essential cognitive skills needed to think critically, to analyze complex information or understand different perspectives. This reduction in cognitive engagement makes us less informed and more susceptible to misinformation and less capable of making thoughtful decisions. It's also contributing to the erosion of the foundation of democratic societies in many nations around the world, where an informed citizenry is crucial for healthy debate and decision making. When we're apathetic or we fail to comprehend the issues, because we feel so overwhelmed by conflicting narratives, our heads are filled with disinformation, we're less likely to engage in meaningful civic processes or hold our leaders accountable. We're also more likely to vote against our best interest, electing individuals who serve wealthy benefactors or corporate interest at the expense of the broader public. And sometimes even putting into power those who lack competence or exhibit autocratic tendencies. Short term content's emphasis on speed and virality leads to the oversimplification of news and social issues. In the quest for views, creators often distill complex events and issues into catchy sound bites or sensational headlines that prioritize engagement over accuracy. And this tendency contributes to a distorted or incomplete perspective where important nuances and details are lost. For those of you who have been paying attention to the news as of late, recently, former President Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, have been propagating this nonsense. I first heard it in the debate between Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, where Trump came out and said, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets. And it's contributed to a dangerous escalation of fear and hostility. And these inflammatory comments rapidly spread through social media. They have resulted in bomb threats. They have had to evacuate schools and municipal buildings in Springfield, Ohio. It's even prompted the involvement of the National Guard. The governor of the state of Ohio, Mike DeWine, came out and said, it's all false. And yet, sadly, some people, including the aforementioned political candidates, are still propagating those conspiracies. In addition, Trump was also claiming that FEMA funds intended for Hurricane Helene that has devastated Georgia, the Carolinas, and a few other states have been diverted to migrants, further spreading disinformation. And social media, the amplification of these distortions fuels xenophobia and divisions. And I've seen this pop up on Facebook. People that I've known. There was a woman that I've worked with in St. Louis at one point. She was actually posting some of this bullshit. It not only threatens public safety, but it undermines trust in critical institutions and further polarizes society. So, I want to talk about the effects of all this short form content on the brain itself. Short form content is designed to provide rapid stimulation. It triggers the release of dopamine, the feel good neurotransmitter. The frequent bursts of dopamine reinforces our addictive scrolling behavior, and it makes us crave more of the instant gratification. Over time, it can desensitize our brain's reward system, making it harder for us to derive pleasure from slower and more meaningful activities such as reading or meditating. The quick consumption of bite sized videos conditions our brain to expect constant stimulation, reducing our ability to focus for extended periods of time. And this affects the neural pathways responsible for sustained attention and focus, making tasks that require deeper cognitive engagement, such as reading or critical thinking, more difficult. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for focus and decision making and impulse control, may be compromised by this constant barrage of short, rapid fire content. Our brain thrives on connections and coherent structures, but short form content encourages this fragmented learning, making it harder for us to retain and recall and apply knowledge coherently. And this superficial learning hinders our ability to form long term memories and engage in deep and reflective thought. Short term content is also altering the structure of our brains. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher order cognitive functions such as attention and decision making, impulse control, long term planning, is especially affected. And frequent exposure to rapid short form content decreases our sustained attention as our brain adapts to these quick dopamine driven hits of information. It's making it harder for us to concentrate on tasks that require longer attention spans. Again, reading, studying, are focusing on complex and detailed information for extended periods. The hippocampus, which is crucial for memory formation and spatial navigation, is also impacted. Constantly switching between short, fragmented content affects how the hippocampus encodes and retrieves information, leading to difficulties in forming long term memories. And without the necessary time and focus required for deep learning, information doesn't get properly consolidated, resulting in weaker retention and recall. The striatum involved in our brain's reward system is highly sensitive to dopamine, becomes desensitized, reducing our sensitivity to everyday rewards, making it harder for us to enjoy activities that required sustained patience, such as long form reading or practices such as meditation. The amygdala, which processes emotions like fear and pleasure, is deeply involved in how we respond to stimuli. And short form content often appeals to emotions, especially through sensational or emotionally charged materials. And this constant stimulation of the amygdala can lead to heightened emotional reactivity and increased susceptibility to sensationalism, leaving us more prone to emotional fatigue, anxiety, and stress. The brain's default mode network is a network of brain regions involved in self referential thought. But the constant engagement with short term content keeps our brains in an externally focused state, reducing the time that we spend in introspective or reflective modes of thinking. and this diminishes our capacity for self awareness, creativity, and problem solving. When it comes to any form of spiritual practices, such as meditation, that require deep reflection or prolonged periods of focused attention, our habit of skimming and consuming shallow information creates this illusion of knowledge without truly understanding. And this habit makes it harder for us to fully immerse ourselves in these practices, which demand time and patience and ongoing discipline. When we become accustomed to quick bursts of information, we may find it extraordinarily difficult to cultivate the sustained attention needed for these intensive practices. Just as short form content creates the illusion of understanding complex issues, it may also create the illusion of progress in our spiritual development. We might feel as though we're achieving something by watching a quick video on mindfulness or meditation, but without consistent and deeper practice, we're not actually making any significant progress because true spiritual development requires sustained, deep engagement with our inner life, something that short form content will never provide. I have for many years been seeing the effects that all this digital content has been having upon people. In years past, there was greater self awareness and connection to one's emotions and bodily sensations, greater connection to one's inner state of being. Over time, as people have become more and more tethered to their devices and consuming all this digital media, I find that there's a diminishment of self awareness and this loss of connectedness to, again, that internal core being. The sad thing about that is when people become so externally focused, their awareness, their attention continually drawn into their devices and their social media feeds, they become so disconnected and lacking of awareness is that they're not able to follow through in order to take the steps necessary to facilitate the much needed healing and their continued growth. And so many of the crucial issues that need to be dealt with, either their emotional wounding or the health related complications that are manifesting in their body, when they're so distracted, they're not able to maintain that focus and the connection to what's going on so that they could follow through and get the much needed healing and continue the process of growth that truly needs to occur. I want to talk now about counteracting the destructive impact of our consumption of short form content. And there are numerous ways that you could go about doing so. So I want to encourage you to make a concerted effort. For instance, read longer articles and books and watch in depth documentaries. Set a time daily to read without distractions. Listen to full audiobooks or watch long form videos and resist the urge to click away or skim, even when you're feeling restless. Train yourself to embrace longer and more complex sources of information. Taking notes will help to deepen your engagement and understanding, whether you're reading an article or listening to an audiobook. Writing down key points or ideas focuses your brain to actively process information rather than passively consuming. And note taking improves your retention and encourages critical thinking. If you find a subject interesting, dive deeper. Read multiple articles or books, or watch comprehensive documentaries on the subject. Attend lectures or webinars to broaden your knowledge and perspectives. The goal is to develop a well rounded, informed understanding rather than relying on superficial snippets of information. And get out into the world and talk to people. Engage in deep conversations allows you to challenge your own understandings, misunderstandings as well, and explore multiple viewpoints. And these conversations require focus and can help to counteract the instant gratification mindset promoted by short form content. Doing hands on activities such as painting or sculpting or woodwork can help to balance the consumption of digital content with creation. And these activities require patience, focus, and mindfulness, qualities that are often eroded by the constant consumption of short and stimulating content. Physical creation allows for a meditative state that enhances your ability to engage deeply with the present moment. Get out and do any other form of activities, whether it's playing baseball or throwing a frisbee or training in martial arts. Having this physical engagement is critically important. Also, be sure to set boundaries on your use of short form content and instead prioritize deeper and more immersive experiences. If you enjoy short form content, just engage with it mindfully and supplement it with long form material to ensure balance. For years, I've used Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Unlike most people, my focus is primarily on following news sources. I seek out the journalists, academics, historians, people whose work inspires me, and I follow political issues here in the United States, as well as geopolitical matters affecting countries like Sri Lanka, Ukraine, and other nations around the world. I'm also increasingly mindful of how I spend my time, making sure that I'm not getting so caught up in the 24/7 news cycle that I'm missing out on engaging with people and activities and experiences that are happening around me. Years ago, when I first traveled to Sri Lanka, it was in the midst of a brutal war that lasted nearly 30 years. Over the years, I've developed close friendships with people whose lives were directly affected by the conflict. Knowing and developing close relationships with people who had lost loved ones on both sides of the conflict was painful for me to witness their suffering, to feel it because I'm very empathic and I wanted to understand better why is all this happening. Also, my own personal experiences. There were times where I walked past bombings in which people had died, one just minutes after it occurred. So I immersed myself reading all kinds of articles and books and watching in depth documentaries. And I've had innumerable conversations with friends or people, even while traveling by train through different parts of Sri Lanka, people who were directly impacted by this war. I even spent considerable amounts of time with former cadres of the LTTE, Liberation Tiger Tamil Elam, which is the rebel army, and including in-depth conversations with former senior commanders of the Tamil Tigers. At the end of the war, I was back in the United States, but the Sri Lankan army was closing in on the Tamil Tigers. And I had this horrible feeling in my body, a sense that something really bad was going to happen. All these people were being pushed into an ever smaller space, and the Sri Lankan military was raining bombs and artillery. There are varying estimates. I think from the United Nations, it was about 30,000 civilians died. The International Crisis Group, I think they said as many as 70,000 civilians and also rebel combatants were just outright executed by the Sri Lankan military. So I joined in with the collective efforts of the Tamil diaspora, and we were using social media, especially Twitter, but other sources as well, to flood the internet with any photos, any video footage, whatever content we could access. And we were desperately trying to get the attention of the United States government, the government in the UK, Australia, Germany, as well as the United Nations, trying to get them to intervene. Our efforts were successful to some extent as a result of the pressure they began to put on the Sri Lankan government, the mass killing, the torture, the disappearances, systematic rape, these gross human rights abuses diminished tremendously as a result of our collective efforts. It was because of my commitment to understanding this conflict and my concern for those involved that I developed this in depth understanding the intricate dynamics of the war and its lasting impact on the people of Sri Lanka. It's highly unlikely that the war that took place in Sri Lanka has any impact on you, and yet there are issues that do concern you. So what I'm getting at in sharing this is the importance, those issues that personally affect you, the issues that matter to you, whatever they may be. I want to encourage you to learn and to strive to understand in depth to the best of your ability, whatever they may be. And for that matter, I also encourage you to look below this video if you happen to be seeing it on YouTube. Click on the link and read the more in depth article. Another example is now, going back to the time I was 17, when I took off on my own, landed in a community of predominantly Kiowa Indians in southwestern Oklahoma, spent a lot of time in peyote meetings with the Kiowa elders. And that's where I met the man who became my mentor, Horace Delkai, one of the last surviving traditional doctors among the Kiowa tribe. Horace transmitted portions of his own healing gifts to me. And over the course of many years, as I was developing a practice, I had people coming to me with a wide range of issues, anything from heart disease and stroke and digestive and respiratory disorders, people that had suffered various forms of trauma, whether it stemmed from abuses suffered in their childhood, such as emotional, physical, verbal, sexual abuse, some combination thereof, traumas that occurred later in their lives. In the beginning, I had a very limited understanding of these issues. Now, on one hand, I understood that these traditional doctors received these extraordinarily powerful gifts of healing. Part of it was transmitted to them from their mentor, but many of them also would repeatedly go through the vision quest. It's a practice that involves going out to fast alone in the mountains for 4 days and nights, no food and water. So I assumed, yeah, if I go on the vision quest, I'm going to develop more of these gifts myself. And yes, that did happen. As I continue going on the vision quest, my capacity to assist people with the range of health related issues, traumas, or emotional wounding is increasing. In addition to developing this capacity, I also needed a greater intellectual understanding of all these issues. So I spent enormous amounts of time immersing myself, reading and listening to massive amounts of information, articles and videos and books, talking with the people I was working with other healthcare practitioners, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, learning everything I possibly could to gain a more in depth understanding so I could be of greater assistance to those individuals with whom I was working. So the fact that I was dealing with my own traumatic wounding, for a couple of years, I worked with the psychotherapist. Although psychotherapy helped me to gain an intellectual understanding, it wasn't actually healing the trauma itself. And that led me to develop an intensive series of meditation practices. In addition, I was buying stacks of books and absorbing all this information because I wanted to better understand my own emotional wounding. One of my favorite quotes is attributed to Albert Einstein. The more I learn, the more I realize I have yet to know. I believe strongly that it's important for all of us to be continually striving for deeper knowledge and understanding, to exercise our brain, because when we fail to do so, then the brain itself, our intellectual capacity atrophies. The examples that I've shared here and more examples in the article, if you go and read it, reflects the kind of immersive, focused learning that encourages true understanding and growth and personal evolution, qualities increasingly at risk in a world dominated by fragmented short form content. It's so easy to get caught up in this quick hit information, but I want to encourage you to do a deep dive into the issues and causes that resonate with you to ignite your passions. I'm not suggesting that you completely abstain from short form content, but just be mindful by limiting your consumption. If your immediate diet consists primarily of short form content, it's akin to subsisting on junk food because it lacks many of the essential nutrients necessary to develop your mind and deepen your understanding of the issues that genuinely matter. So please make a conscientious effort to engage with more in depth reading, listening, and meaningful conversations about the subjects that hold importance to you, those issues that are relevant at this time in our world today. My intention here is to emphasize the importance of deep and focused engagement. And if you're struggling to find your passions or wondering why you haven't yet developed a deep interest in any subject, the harmful effects of short form content may be partly at fault. When you engage deeply with new information, it will not only expand your knowledge, but it's also going to strengthen and develop your brain, enhancing your cognitive abilities and your capacity for critical thinking. This mental exercise is crucial for maintaining cognitive flexibility and adaptability as you continue to learn, as cultivating patience, curiosity, and discipline is essential for unlocking the full power of learning and personal growth. Thank you for joining me here. If you haven't already done so, look below, click like, subscribe, share this video with anyone you feel will benefit, and do reach out to me if I can be of assistance.